Hey everyone, it's Chelsea with Savannah in studio, and today for our newest installment of Messy Yoga Mom, I wanted to talk about productivity. And in the last few years, I've really taken to heart that a constant focus on being productive all the time, whether it's at work or at home or with ourselves, can be very harmful and detrimental to our mental and physical health. It's, for all intents and purposes, I do believe that it's a scam to constantly be focused on always being productive. And I thought today for Messy Yoga Mom that we would talk a little bit about how constantly being on and being productive and always focused on making progress can actually hinder our progress and hurt us in the long run. So a little bit of background about myself. I've mentioned it a couple of times on this channel and through a variety of different posts that I am a Virgo sun, a Taurus moon, and a Capricorn rising, which basically means that I feel happiest and most centered when I am making progress and being productive and always on the go and always doing something. And so it's taken a really long time for me to understand that even though I feel most comfortable constantly working and being a workaholic, it's not good for me. And it can lead to a lot of issues, not only feeling physically stressed and exhausted and having physical pain and lack of energy, but it also puts mental strain on me, whether I get burnout and my body and my mind just basically kind of shut down and they're like, you need to rest, or I become depressed, or I'm consciously and actively always anxious and I'm always moving. As you can see with my hands, it's really difficult for me to not be doing something when I'm actually trying to sit still and focus. And because of my constant belief that I always have to be doing something, I always have to be making progress on something, I always have to be doing something productive with my time, it can leave me absolutely, utterly exhausted, burnt out, to the point of a health crisis. And it can also affect me by always feeling like I'm an imposter, I'm never good enough because I'm not making it up to my own standards for my own work and how I'm using my time. And it's really only been in the last 3 years or so when I really started leaning into yogic philosophy and cognitive behavioral therapy and shadow work that I really started to see how much stress and trauma I was putting myself through by constantly trying to be productive and trying to always progress forward. And so, one of the biggest things that my most influential teachers have taught me over the last 3 years is that it's valid to rest, it's important to your health to be able to take time for yourself, to recuperate, to reset and regroup, and that you don't always have to be switched on. And, at first I didn't really understand that concept, being a triple earth sign. I don't understand it, because I always have projects and appointments and meetings and everything else that I want to do. And so a lot of time, my rest and reset time was just zoning out. And I just thought that was normal and average. But as I was going through my trauma training, I learned that in actuality, I was going through burnout, that I was pushing myself so hard that everything was just shutting down, and that I was just in a constant state of stress response, and that fight, flight, freeze and fawn, which basically burnout is a form of freeze response, because everything is shutting down and all you can do is lay there and binge watch something, because you just can't physically or mentally comprehend doing anything else. And in my mind, that's what rest was. And so I was like, well, I don't really want to rest, because then I don't get anything done and I don't feel good, and I waste time watching whatever, Castlevania for 3 hours straight and then going to bed. And what my teachers taught me over the last 3 years is that rest is about focusing on your needs, whether it's your physical needs, your mental needs, or your emotional needs, making sure that you are focusing on regulating your nervous system, and that you are finding ways to support yourself and what you need in that moment and throughout your day. So, I have really tried to lean into this, and I usually schedule at least 1 day a week where I take it a little bit easy. I might rest a little bit, take a nap here or there, read, watch a little TV, go for a walk, go swimming, something that makes me feel centered and relaxed without there being some sort of alternative agenda for me to be making progress or being productive with my time, because rest is productive, but in a different way. Probably one of the places in my life that I feel the most pressure and stress to be productive really has to do with parenthood and taking care of the house. As many of you probably know, my husband works outside of the house. He's a journeyman, and so he works very, very long hours, and because I own my own business and I work out of the house, my time is a little bit more flexible, and I can have time to do work and then do a little bit of housework or meal prepping, taking care of the kids and working on their homework, and just being a little bit more fluid with my time, whereas his time is very structured and rigid. And it's really been that way for basically the entire time that we have been together, since 2003, because most of that time before we had children, I was an undergraduate and then I was a graduate student, and so I lived on college student time, and so my days were very up and down, and I had a lot of flexibility, and so a lot of the housework and later on the family time and focus on the kids was part of my role because I had that greater flexibility than my husband. And every time that I would get on Facebook or that I would talk to other parents, I felt like I was never doing enough for my children, or that my house was never clean enough or organized enough, or that I was never doing enough in general as a parent to support my children. And so I constantly felt like a failure, an imposter as a parent, because I wasn't being productive enough at home with my kids. And it's really been over the last couple of years that I've had to say, look, to myself, I am doing the best that I can. There is no way for me to be more productive than I already am. And, sometimes it's just a phase in life that the house is messy all the time, and the kids are just outside playing for hours on end rather than being involved in 1,000 extracurricular activities or doing tutoring or tons of music lessons or whatever it is that society thinks that I need to be doing or should be doing with my kids to make sure that they are competitive in society for their future. At some point, I had to say enough was enough, because not only was I stressing my kids out, but I was stressing myself out and living in perpetual burnout and just hating life and hating everyone around me because I was so traumatized and unhappy and depressed and anxious about everything that was within my control, but also was outside of my control. So I think there's been this almost increased awareness and hyper focus on increasing productivity in American society, particularly since the turn of the 20th century. Now, of course, you can go back further to the beginning of the first Industrial Revolution, definitely under the second Industrial Revolution. But when it comes to what we're currently dealing with in society, it's really just absolutely escalated in the last 70, 90 years since World War II. And about a month ago, I was at my parents' house in central Kansas, and we were watching the news, and there was a news report on our local channel that basically was focusing on how do we increase productivity, especially during the pandemic, and how do we get more out of a work week, and how do we get more out of workers. And it just made me viscerally upset, because every person that I know that has a job or is a stay-at-home parent, they are working their asses off. They spend more time doing some form of work than they do anything else other than sleep. And even then, most of the time, my friends and colleagues are exhausted because they're not getting much sleep. It's like there is no more boundaries between work and home, especially now that we've been in over 18 months of a pandemic and people are still working at home with all the Zoom meetings and the phone calls and having to carve out a workspace at your dining room table. It's a lot, and it's just causing more stress and more discontent and depression and anxiety than anything else. I was just very taken aback that they're looking for a study on more productivity, when the last time I read any economic studies in the last, 5 or so years, maybe 10 at most, American society has increased in productivity by light years. That we're just constantly working and churning things out and doing things that we don't have time for anything else. But yet wages have stagnated, the wealth gap has become this giant trench divide between the classes, eroding the middle class to an extensive degree. But yet they are still wanting people to lean into being more productive. And I think that is where the scam really is that there's, if you want people to be productive, you make them enjoy what they do for a living. You make them want to be there. As a undergrad and a graduate student, and later on a adjunct history professor, I was always on. I was working from basically 8 in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, sporadically throughout my day, with a little bit of lulls here and there where I would do other things, or I would focus on my children or doing chores. But I was working that giant stretch, and sometimes I even had to work past midnight to make sure that I was meeting the deadlines that I needed for my classes and for my publications. And now that I work from home and own my own business, I've backed off a little bit. Normally my day doesn't start until about 9 a.m. I spend the first 2.5 hours of the day making sure that the kids are getting up and that they're getting on the buses. And then I take time to have breakfast by myself and watch the news. And then I really start my work day around 9 o'clock. And I will work for a couple of hours, and then I'll take a little bit of a break, maybe go exercise or have another meal, or just kind of rest and read something enjoyable. And then I will go back and continue on with my work. And I usually, unless something really has to get done and I have a very strict deadline, I will end my work day around 5 o'clock when it's time to start getting dinner ready. And that's fine. I'm incredibly productive, but I don't hate every minute of that work that I'm doing. I'm not trying to distract myself and avoid the work. I'm sitting down and I'm working constantly, and enjoying every minute of it. But as a academic, there was a lot of times that I would work for an hour and I would dislike it so much that I just couldn't push myself to do another hour, and I had to stop and take an hour break and recenter to try to stave off burnout. And then I would do another incredibly intense couple of hours, but then I'd have to shut down again. And that's why it was so long and drawn out, because I absolutely hated much of what I was doing as an academic. Don't get me wrong, there was parts that I absolutely loved. The public speaking, the travel, the research, the writing, I absolutely loved. But I didn't really care for the grading and administrative work that I had to do as an academic. And that was a lot of what my time was spent doing, was things that I hated. And so then I dreaded going to work, and so then I wasn't as productive, and it just caused this big old spiral. But as a yoga facilitator and a shadow work facilitator and all the things that I do for my business, I'm happy and I love it. And there's times that I'm like, man, I don't really want to put it down because I'm enjoying what I'm doing. And that's what makes me productive. That's what helps me progress toward my goals, is that I really and truly love what I do now. And I think that that is one of the things that we're lacking as a society, is that if you don't think that your employees are productive enough, maybe look at the environment that they're in, their state of mind, their stress levels. And I'm not saying get them a pizza party. Please, God, don't do that. They need actual, tangible things that make their lives better. Better wages, better health insurance, better access to resources. They need to feel supported in their work. And this goes for the same thing with parents, with individuals. If we are to be productive and make progress toward our goals, we have to feel safe, secure, and stable in our lives. And once we feel that, then productivity and progress come naturally. So I would love to hear what you think about this topic. Do you think that productivity is a scam? Do you think that it is important to our way of life? You know, just drop your comments into the comment section. I always love to hear from you. And while you're down there kind of looking at the description and all that good stuff, consider liking this video, maybe sharing it. At the very least, you know, consider subscribing for more content just like this and a whole host of other things. The next video workshop that I'm going to be doing is for Red Moon Women's Circle, and it's all about setting boundaries. And so I think it really goes well with this idea of productivity and work, home, life balance, because it's really about setting boundaries between work and your outside life. So until next time, I'm Chelsea with Savannah Wren Studio, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.